Praise be to God, there is no other God except God. We cannot find any example in the Quran where a believer befriends a disbeliever, unless it is by force. For example, the wife of Pharaoh, as a wife, she must have befriended him, but she was forced to do it, and regardless, she still ended up paying for it by saving Moses from the river and paying for his feeding. Also, Joseph befriended a bad person in prison, but he was forced to stay in prison, and regardless, Joseph still ended up paying for befriending a bad guy, which is one of the reasons why he ended up staying a few additional years in prison. Now, in all the cases in the Quran where the believers were free, you cannot find a single example of them befriending a disbeliever. For example, the 7 sleepers of the cave even went and hid in the cave so that they do not befriend disbelievers. Verse 64 says, "A good example has been set for you by Abraham and those with him. They said to their people, we disown." Basically, we cut all ties of friendship between us and you, and the idols that you worship beside God. "We denounce you, and you will see nothing from us except animosity." So nothing except animosity, which means no friendship at all, and hatred until you believe in God alone. Now, if any one of us still thinks that these examples are not enough, let's look at the list of verses which give us direct prohibitions and exclusions, but please make sure to check these verses directly in the Arabic Quran, not in English translations. You should check them directly in the Arabic Quran for a final conclusion. Let me start with a key verse which sets the clear boundaries within which we should understand all the other verses. It's verse 555. And again, please check the verse in the Arabic, because the English translations do not do it full justice. And the Arabic uses a key word, which is the word only. So it excludes all the other possibilities of friendship. So verse 555 says, your only, I repeat, your only friend should be God and his messenger and those who have believed, those who observe the contact prayer and give the zakat, and they bow down. So we are only allowed to be friends with these. And anyone outside of it is prohibited as a friend, because the verse says only. So this verse puts clear boundaries on our friendships. And all the other verses must be understood within what this verse says. For example, verse 551 in the Arabic Quran says, do not take the Jews and the Christians, any Jews and Christians, without exception. Do not take them as friends. They are friends with one another. And whomever is friends with them, then he is from them. Verse 580 tells us that you can see many becoming friends with those who disbelieve. And then it says, it's definitely evil what they are doing. This is from the Arabic Quran, not from translations. Verse 923 in the Arabic Quran says, do not take as friends even your fathers and brothers if they prefer disbelieving over believing. And whoever does this, they are wrongdoers. Verse 328 says, no believer is to be friends with a disbeliever instead of a believer. And whoever does that, they have nothing with God, except if they are forced. Verse 114 says, O you who believe, do not take the disbelievers as friends instead of the believers. Do you wish to give God a clear evidence against you? So all these verses are clear that believers should not take any disbeliever as a friend, except if they are forced. And verse 555 tells us that the only friends which we can have are God, his messenger, and the believers who do the contact prayer and give the zakat, and they bow down. And this is very clear in the Arabic Quran. However, the word friend in the modern world in English is a constantly evolving word. And sometimes people use it to refer to acquaintances, for example, sometimes to co-workers, sometimes to teammates, sometimes to schoolmates with whom they might be doing a school project together, for example, or maybe to a trading partner. And therefore, we should not rush to express a clear-cut prohibition about friendships in modern English, because people mean many different things when they say friend. And a lot of those different definitions of the word friend are not necessarily prohibited in the Quran in peace times. But the word friend in the Arabic Quran is more clear and stronger, not referring to an acquaintance, for example, but to a friend to whom you would do a favor without asking for a payment, and whom would also do you a favor without asking for a payment. And you would protect each other if necessary. But because the word friend in English is not clearly defined, then most English translators of the Quran shied away from translating from the Arabic Quran the clear prohibition of being friends with disbelievers, because they were afraid that by doing so, they would indirectly end up also prohibiting other unprohibited things, like business partners and so on. Because the Quran allows trade and business business with disbelievers during peace times. So to prevent this misunderstanding, a lot of smart translators were forced to hide or soften the prohibition of friendship with disbelievers. But the Arabic Quran does contain clear prohibitions regarding clear situations of friendship with disbelievers. However, in the English of today, because of the unclear definition of the word friend, when someone asks us, are we allowed to be friends with disbelievers? If we don't have time to explain, we should simply slightly downgrade the prohibition and say we are not allowed to be close friends with disbelievers. And it's linguistically correct to use the phrase close friend instead of friend, because in the Arabic Quran the word friend and close come from the same root word anyway. Basically someone who is close to you, a close friend. So that's what we say if we don't have time to explain. But if we have time to explain, we should say we are not allowed to be friends, any kinds of friends, with disbelievers, which is what the Quran says. But let us explain what we mean when we say friends. And then we explain how that word does not include co-workers, or sports teammates, or schoolmates, or business partners, and so on. If you keep a reasonable professional distance from them, more like an acquaintance, and not like drinking buddies or bonding and stuff like that, for example. So the Quran does prohibit us from being any kinds of friends with disbelievers if when we say friends we mean someone with whom we are close enough to do and expect favors from one another without an expectation of payment and to protect each other if need be. And I'm using this definition of friendship because in the Arabic Quran the word friend also means protector, and also according to verses 1877 and 2461, a close friend is someone to whom you do a favor without expecting them to pay you, and you receive a favor without them expecting that you would pay them for that. So to conclude, in more than 20 verses, the Quran prohibits us from being close friends with non-submitters, or it prohibits us from being any kind of friends with non-submitters if we define the word friend correctly. And despite this clear prohibition, there is a verse in the Quran which is almost always misunderstood by people, and they end up thinking that the Quran actually allows being friends or close friends with non-submitters. Let me tell you what the verse says, and then tell you where the misunderstanding comes from. Verse 68 says, God does not prohibit you from those who do not fight you in religion and do not drive you out of your homes. And the first part of this verse seems to allow friendship with disbelievers as long as they do not fight us in religion and do not drive us out of our homes. However, once you read the verse further on, it tells you what God allows you to do with those peaceful disbelievers. Let's read the whole verse now. It says God does not prohibit. It's not mentioning friendship here, just the prohibition of general contact and crossing paths in the same spaces. So again, God does not prohibit you from those who do not fight you in religion and do not drive you out of your homes to deal with them with kindness and justice. This is not allowing close friendship. It's only allowing kindness and justice. Friendships with them are prohibited in verse 555. But this verse, it is telling us to be just when we make a business deal, for example, with a peaceful disbeliever, or be kind with our co-workers at our job, or when you talk to a stranger in the road, but it is not allowing us to become close friends with them. Verse 555 is still there, which prohibits clear, close friendships with any people who do not do the contact prayer and the zakat. Verse 68 does not nullify verse 555. It only tells us how to deal with peaceful non-submitters while not being friends with them. It says you can deal with them with kindness and justice, despite not being friends with them. In peaceful times, we are allowed to show kindness even to disbelievers, while not being their friends. And also we can have them as sports teammates, classmates, co-workers, business partners, and other defined activities which are in our interests, while not being their friends. If by friends we mean doing and receiving favors from them or going to their houses for dinner and stuff like that, which usually have no other purpose other than bonding and being friends. Now, the first contact or the introduction to any person is always excused. For example, when two guests came to Abraham, he prepared a meal for them, despite the fact that he did not know who they were, and potentially they could have been disbelievers. This is because in any first contact with anyone, when we first get to know them, we should always assume that they are believers first, until they tell us otherwise. Once they tell us otherwise, or once we see that they did not join us in the contact prayer, then we distance ourselves from them And the better way is to tell them why, which is an opportunity to preach and spread the message. We wouldn't be able to spread the message if we never contacted disbelievers at any time. And the best way to have this first introductory meeting or contact in your home or in their home or in a restaurant is to have another submitter with you. In this way, you are stronger against the influences of the devil if they turn out to be the representatives of the devil. And once you see that, due to the fact that they showed no interest to ever learn the contact prayer, when you had to do the contact prayer, then you stop inviting them in your home or going to their home. And by the way, inviting people in your home or going to their homes is one of the closest forms of friendship, which is why this form is one of the deepest prohibited forms of friendship once they show to us that they are not submitters. And if you break this prohibition, the other submitters have the right to feel betrayed by you. Let me give you an example from the time of Rashad Khalifa and how he thought that this is prohibited, and he considered this a betrayal from a woman. Hear this video, for example.
When I was in Vancouver, you had Lulu McNoon in your house.
She wanted to meet with you. The way I see it, you guys can meet, and if there was a misunderstanding between believers and listeners, you should reconcile. That's the way I look at it. I never looked at it in the sense that I was supporting a disbeliever.
Well, fine. I mean, see, you can explain it as much as you want. As much as you want.
When you told
I can't
me,
make worrying about you when you have people opposing God and opposing God's messenger in your house.
when you,
So, staying and eating together with non-submitters in your house or their house is a serious issue. Another way to look at friendships is to ask yourself a question. If I did the contact prayer right now, will this person join me? If the answer is yes, then that person is very likely your friend. If the answer is no, then he's very likely not your friend. And if the answer is, well, I wouldn't be able to fully do the contact prayer right now anyway, because maybe it is forenoon, or maybe you are in a public place where it is dangerous to fully prostrate, which I explain in the video titled Lessening and Shortening the Contact Prayers. And if that is the case, in situations where you yourself would be lessening or shortening the contact prayer, which in the Arabic Quran is not technically a contact prayer at all, but a compensation for it, then in that case you are not sufficiently different from that other person, because you yourself wouldn't have to do the actual contact prayer with movements. And therefore this means that you are not that different from that person in that situation, which means very likely that he or she is your acquaintance, or maybe your schoolmate, or maybe your co-worker, and so on, but very likely not your enemy and not your friend. Now, using this logic of being joined in the contact prayer as a measure of friendship, we can also conclude that since children under 12 are not obliged to do the contact prayer, then we should not prohibit friendships with them, regardless of what they think they believe. Really, there is no substantial difference between believing children and disbelieving children, and it's okay if they are friends while being children. Once they get between 12 and 18 years old, they should be gradually removed from friendships with disbelievers. Also, in addition to these rules, there is an additional layer of prohibitions in friendships, which has to do with relations between males and females. Now, taking all these into account, let's summarize this issue. This table is a summary of the prohibited, often prohibited, and allowed friendships, depending on the friendship level and what type of people you are dealing with. So here we have non-submitters and submitters, and among the non-submitters we have the hostile ones, the opponents, and the peaceful ones. And among the submitters we have the involuntary submitters, which are seriously sick people, the handicapped, the starving, children under 18, and so on. And then finally we have voluntary submitters, which is us. Now, when it comes to the hostile non-submitters, who fight us because of religion, and the opponents who actively oppose God and His messenger, they are completely prohibited from us. We should not live with them, or have them as close friends, or have them as friends, or have them as acquaintances. Even trading with them is prohibited. It's a complete separation from them. But when it comes to the peaceful non-submitters, which is the majority of the people today, it depends whether they are from a different family or from the same family. If they are from a different family and the opposite gender, then we are prohibited to live together, or be a close friend, or a friend with her if you are a male, or with him if you are a female. But sometimes it is okay to be their acquaintance, and sometimes not, depending on the situation, as long as we keep it professional. And by the way, this orange square here is not clearly defined on purpose. It is left as often prohibited, not because the Arabic Quran is not clear about this, but because the word acquaintance sometimes fits within the prohibited categories of the Arabic Quran, more towards the friendship, and sometimes it fits within the allowed categories, like trading and doing business and having common projects for the benefit of the humankind and so on. Each case is different, or it can be that part of it is prohibited and part of it is not, simultaneously. And the same applies to all these other orange squares. Even though they are well defined in the Arabic Quran, we do not have the clarity of words in English to prohibit them completely or allow them completely. Now, next category. Peaceful non-submitters of a different family but with the same gender as ours, or the ones from the same family as ours of any gender. We are allowed to have them as acquaintances, or trade with them, or have them as sports teammates, and so on. Basically, cooperate in righteous things with them if it is our own personal interest, and not cooperate in the prohibited things. However, it is likely that some of the friendships with them might be prohibited, so we just try to minimize our friendships with them from time to time, to make sure that the professional side dominates compared to the warm, friendly side. Of course, we have to be kind and just with them, but that does not automatically imply a meaningful friendship. We are prohibited to live together or be close friends with them. And you can analyze the rest of the table yourself. But let me draw your attention to the prohibited parts only, the red squares. These 4 red squares do not happen in democracies. These other 4 red squares are rare because very few people have heard about the modern messengers, and you encounter those people rarely. And if you go against these prohibitions, you will probably do it in a hidden way anyway, because you know that it will upset us. And these ones have to do with cross-gender issues, and if anyone breaks those prohibitions, again, they probably do it while the other people do not know. And also, these last 2 ones are probably private cases, and the community does not hear about it. And now we are left with these last 3 ones, which are the only ones which are both clear prohibitions and also in matters which you are not allowed to hide, or which we as a community will know anyway if you are truly a submitter. And this is why if you break these 3 prohibitions, you have to pay through the community of submitters, and you can learn how to pay for those sins in the videos titled Living Together with Non-Submitters Part 1 and Part 2. Now, as you can see, there is some wiggle room in today's world in these orange areas. And if your parent or spouse is also a submitter, out of loyalty and respect for them, you should make adjustments to your own friendships according to their interpretation of these wiggle rooms regarding who they want you to be friends with or not. And this is a whole issue in itself on how to respect our parents and spouses who are submitters. Also, a percentage of your time being friends with non-submitters is forced, and that forced behavior usually happens in these orange areas, or close to them. For example, you might have to laugh to the jokes of your manager at work, or maybe you have to have lunch with a potential business partner, and then it might turn into several meetings because you haven't still discussed all the details, or things like that. These are very likely partially forced friendship cases. And for this, you will neither be punished and neither be rewarded in the next world. However, this forced behavior definitely does not happen in the first 2 rows in this table. We cannot say, for example, that the government forced us to oppose the messenger. Democracies are not concerned with who is and who is not a messenger. And also, democracies are not fighting us because of religion. And you can learn more about this in the Friday sermon titled The Global Forced Behavior. And finally, if you just have honest intentions and love God, you will get most of this issue right. Any small mistakes which you might make unintentionally regarding friendships, you usually compensate for them by being an active submitter, which means that you earn extra credit in these green ones, and also simply by attending the Friday sermons, you earn extra credit for fulfilling these other green ones. They are one of the ways to deserve more blessings from God.